Morning sunlight spilled across the rolling countryside, painting the hills in warm shades of gold as friends and family gathered beneath white floral arches. Soft music drifted through the cool autumn air, while laughter echoed across the quiet valley. Everything about the wedding seemed picture-perfect, the kind of celebration people remembered for years. Yet beneath the smiles and applause, a silence neither bride nor groom could fully explain lingered like a distant storm waiting beyond the horizon. Daniel Harper stood near the altar, nervously adjusting his tie for what felt like the 100th time. At 32, he had spent most of his life repairing engines in a small-town garage, preferring honest work over crowded conversations. Those who knew him described him as dependable, patient, and almost painfully trusting. Meeting Emily Carter only 6 months earlier had changed everything. Their connection had been immediate, effortless, and unlike anything either of them had experienced before. When Emily appeared at the end of the aisle, every conversation faded into silence. Her elegant white dress shimmered beneath the morning sun, and her gentle smile carried equal measures of joy and uncertainty. Daniel could not stop staring. "You look incredible," he whispered as she reached him. Emily smiled softly. "You're not so bad yourself." A ripple of laughter spread through the guests before the ceremony continued. Their vows were simple, heartfelt, and sincere. Daniel promised loyalty through every hardship. Emily promised love without reservation, though her voice trembled almost imperceptibly before she spoke the final words. The applause that followed seemed endless. Friends embraced them, while relatives congratulated the newlyweds with cheerful optimism. For everyone watching, their whirlwind romance had become proof that genuine love could still arrive unexpectedly. Few questioned why two people who had known each other for barely half a year had decided to marry so quickly. The reception unfolded inside an old wooden barn decorated with strings of glowing lights and fresh flowers. Music filled the room while guests danced and celebrated. Daniel laughed more freely than anyone had seen in years, his happiness impossible to hide. Emily laughed with him, yet every few minutes her attention drifted toward the entrance. Each time the doors opened, she briefly stopped smiling before quietly relaxing again. Later, one of Daniel's cousins gathered everyone together. "Come on," she announced happily. "Let's take a giant family picture before the sun goes down." Guests eagerly assembled outside. Daniel reached for Emily's hand. She hesitated. I think I'll skip this one," she said quietly. He looked confused. "Why? You'll regret missing it. I'm just feeling overwhelmed." "You go ahead." Daniel studied her face but saw only nervousness. Assuming wedding stress had finally caught up with her, he kissed her forehead before joining the others. From across the garden, Emily watched the camera flash repeatedly while remaining carefully outside every frame. As evening settled across the countryside, the celebration gradually slowed. While Daniel chatted with friends, Emily stepped onto the empty porch overlooking the fields. Her phone vibrated inside her purse. One unread message. Her expression immediately changed. She opened it. "You can't hide forever." For several long seconds she simply stared. Then, without replying, she deleted the message. When Daniel walked outside moments later, he found her gazing into the darkness. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Emily forced another smile. "Just tired." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, completely reassured. As they drove away beneath a sky filled with stars, Daniel believed he was beginning the happiest chapter of his life. Beside him, Emily silently watched the passing roads, carrying fears she had never shared. Somewhere behind them, unseen eyes followed the newlyweds, while the shadows of another life quietly began closing the distance. The morning after their wedding arrived wrapped in gentle sunshine, washing away the excitement of the previous evening with peaceful silence. Daniel Harper drove along winding country roads toward a quiet lakeside cabin they had rented for their honeymoon. Emily Carter rested beside him, watching forests and distant hills glide past the window. She smiled whenever Daniel glanced her way, yet beneath that calm expression lingered the same quiet unease that had followed her throughout the wedding day. "This place is perfect," Daniel said as the cabin finally appeared between towering pine trees. Emily nodded warmly. It's exactly what we needed. The cabin overlooked a still lake where mist floated above the water each morning. Days passed slowly. They cooked together, explored woodland trails, and spent evenings sitting beside a crackling fireplace. Daniel found comfort in the simplicity of married life. Every ordinary moment convinced him he had made the best decision of his life. Emily tried just as hard to embrace that happiness, but small interruptions kept breaking the peaceful rhythm. One afternoon, Daniel suggested organizing the paperwork they had brought for changing addresses, insurance, and banking information after the wedding. "I'll handle the documents," Emily said quickly. Daniel looked surprised. "We're married now," he replied gently. "We can do it together." She forced a smile. "I know. They're just a mess. I'll sort everything tonight." Her answer seemed harmless, yet she carefully gathered every folder before Daniel could read a single page. Later that evening, they sat outside watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and crimson. The conversation drifted naturally toward childhood memories. "I used to fish with my dad every summer," Daniel said, smiling. "What about you? Did your family ever take vacations like this?" Emily stared across the water without answering immediately. "Not really. What was your hometown like?" She hesitated again. "Changed a lot." Daniel laughed softly. "You always dodge questions about growing up." Emily looked down. "Some memories are better left behind." The words ended the conversation as completely as if someone had closed a heavy door between them. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, Emily quietly stepped onto the porch. The cold air stung her face as she clutched her phone. There were no new messages, yet she checked repeatedly before finally slipping the device back into her pocket. For years she had lived beneath a carefully rebuilt identity, leaving behind a painful history she believed would never stop haunting her. Every move, every new beginning, every relationship had been shaped by the desperate hope that the past would eventually lose her trail. She had convinced herself that disappearing completely was the only path toward an ordinary life. Now, standing beneath a sky crowded with stars, she feared that illusion was beginning to crumble. Across the narrow road overlooking the lake, headlights briefly flashed between the trees before disappearing again. Inside the parked vehicle, an unseen figure lowered a pair of binoculars. The stranger watched the cabin patiently. Every entrance, every window, every movement. A camera quietly captured photographs as Daniel switched off the living room lights and Emily returned indoors. The engine remained silent. No attempt was made to approach them. The watcher simply observed, recording each passing moment with unsettling patience, as though waiting for precisely the right opportunity. Inside the cabin, Daniel slept peacefully beside the woman he loved without sensing the danger gathering beyond the trees. Emily closed her eyes, hoping tomorrow would feel different. Neither realized someone had already begun turning their quiet honeymoon into the opening move of something far darker. The peaceful honeymoon faded into memory as ordinary life quietly returned. Daniel Harper unlocked the doors of Harper Auto Repair before sunrise, breathing in the familiar scent of motor oil, worn rubber, and cold steel. The steady rhythm of repairing engines always settled his thoughts, and after marrying Emily, even the longest workdays felt lighter. He caught himself smiling for no reason, believing the future had finally begun unfolding exactly as he had always hoped. By mid-morning, customers filled the small garage. Daniel worked beneath the hood of an aging pickup truck when the front office door creaked open. A tall man stepped inside. He wore a dark coat despite the warm weather and kept his hands tucked into his pockets. His expression revealed nothing. "You Daniel Harper?" the stranger asked. Daniel wiped grease from his hands. "That's me. Need your car fixed?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. "I only need a minute." Something about the visitor's calm voice made the busy garage suddenly feel quieter. "What is this about?" Daniel asked. The man glanced around before lowering his voice. "It's about your wife." Daniel frowned immediately. "What about Emily?" The stranger studied him for several uncomfortable seconds. "How long have you known her?" Daniel crossed his arms. "Why does that matter?" "It matters more than you realize." Daniel's patience began wearing thin. "If you've got something to say, say it." Instead, The man reached into his coat and placed an old weathered envelope on the service counter. "You deserve answers." Daniel looked down at it but made no attempt to touch it. "Answers to what?" The stranger slowly backed toward the door. "Ask her." Before Daniel could stop him, the visitor disappeared outside. Daniel hurried after him, but the sidewalk was already empty. A dark sedan pulled away from the curb without revealing its license plate. For several moments Daniel simply stood there, puzzled by the encounter. His coworker leaned through the garage doorway. "Friend of yours?" Daniel shook his head. Never seen him before. He returned inside, picked up the envelope and turned it over in his hands. There was no address, no return name. Only his own handwritten name stared back at him. Curiosity tugged at him. Trust held him back. Daniel carried the envelope into his office and slipped it inside the bottom drawer of his desk. "If somebody has something to say about Emily," he muttered quietly, "they can say it to both of us." The drawer clicked shut. Hours later he returned home, exhausted but cheerful. Emily greeted him with a warm embrace before noticing an unfamiliar envelope sticking halfway from his work bag. "What's that?" she asked casually. Daniel shrugged. "Probably nothing." He explained the strange visitor while removing his boots near the front door. Emily's smile disappeared. What did he look like?" "Tall. Dark coat. Didn't give his name." Her breathing became noticeably slower. "And the envelope? I never opened it." Daniel disappeared upstairs to shower, leaving the bag beside the kitchen table. The moment the bathroom door closed, Emily reached inside. Her trembling fingers lifted the faded envelope. For several long seconds, she simply stared at the worn paper before carefully breaking the seal. Inside rested several aging photographs and copies of official records. The color drained from her face. "No," she whispered. Her hands began shaking uncontrollably. Without hearing Daniel's footsteps overhead, she hurriedly returned everything exactly as she had found it before sliding the envelope back into the bag. When Daniel came downstairs, Emily forced another reassuring smile. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded too quickly. "Just thinking about dinner." Daniel accepted the answer without suspicion. That night, while he slept peacefully upstairs, Emily remained awake in the darkness, staring toward the front window whenever headlights passed outside. Somewhere beyond the quiet neighborhood, the mysterious visitor watched from a distance, satisfied that the first move had succeeded. For the first time, buried secrets no longer felt safely hidden. They had begun clawing their way back into the light, and someone intended to make certain they never disappeared again. Morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains, but the warmth it carried failed to reach Daniel Harper. The weathered envelope rested on the dining table exactly where he had left it the previous evening. Emily moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast with careful, measured movements, avoiding his eyes whenever she sensed him looking in her direction. Neither of them spoke much. The silence felt heavier than any argument they had ever imagined having. Daniel wrapped both hands around a mug of untouched coffee. "You barely slept," Emily said softly. "Neither did you." She lowered her gaze. For several long moments, the envelope remained between them like an unwelcome guest. Finally, Daniel reached forward and broke the remaining seal. Inside were copies of court records, legal documents, and faded photographs taken more than a decade earlier. The woman in the photographs looked unmistakably like Emily, only younger and identified under another legal name. Attached paperwork showed that she had legally changed her identity after cooperating in a criminal investigation involving an organized fraud network. Newspaper clippings described the disappearance of several suspects before they could be arrested, while official documents confirmed that authorities had relocated a key witness for her protection. Daniel read every page twice. His heartbeat quickened. When he finally looked up, Emily's eyes were already filled with tears. "You were going to tell me?" he asked quietly. "I wanted to. When? I don't know." Daniel pushed the papers across the table. "You married me without telling me your real history." "My legal name is real," she replied, struggling to steady her voice. "Everything since then has been real, but everything before it wasn't." Emily shook her head immediately. "It wasn't a lie. It was survival." She slowly explained that years earlier she had witnessed serious financial crimes committed by people she once trusted. After agreeing to testify, investigators warned her that several members of the group remained free. They advised her to begin a new life under a legally changed identity because threats continued long after the trial. "I thought if I buried that part of my life, it would finally stay buried," she whispered. Daniel stared at the documents scattered across the table. "You should have trusted me. I wanted to, every single day." "Then why didn't you?" Emily wiped tears from her face. "Because before I disappeared, I told someone else the truth. Instead of believing me, they blamed me for everything that happened. They said I had ruined their life just by bringing danger into it. After that, I promised myself I would never risk losing another person the same way." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "So you decided to hide it instead." "I convinced myself I was protecting us." The room fell silent once more. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the windows. Daniel wanted to believe every word she had spoken. The woman he loved still sat across from him, frightened, vulnerable, and clearly carrying years of emotional scars. Yet trust, once fractured, refused to repair itself in a single conversation. "You should have given me the choice," he said at last. Emily nodded slowly. "I know." Neither of them noticed a vehicle parked across the street until its engine quietly started. From behind tinted glass, an unseen observer lowered a camera after capturing another photograph through the front window. Inside the house, Daniel carefully gathered the documents back into the envelope. He did not throw them away. He did not forgive her. He simply carried them upstairs, leaving Emily alone at the kitchen table with tears slipping silently down her face. For the first time since their wedding, love no longer felt powerful enough to overcome fear. Trust had cracked beneath the weight of buried truths, and uncertainty had taken its place. Outside, the mysterious watcher drove away without attracting attention, satisfied that the hidden past had finally reached the surface. The damage was done, but the plan had only just begun, and someone intended to widen the growing distance between husband and wife until there was no path back. Days passed, but the warmth that had once filled Daniel Harper's home seemed to disappear with each sunrise. The envelope remained locked inside the drawer of his bedside table, yet its contents occupied every quiet moment. While he continued repairing engines at the garage, his thoughts constantly drifted back to the documents, the photographs, and Emily's confession. He no longer questioned whether she loved him. Instead, he wrestled with a different question that refused to leave his mind. If she had hidden something so significant before their marriage, what else had she chosen not to reveal? Emily noticed the growing distance immediately. Daniel still greeted her politely each morning, but conversations became painfully brief. Meals ended in silence. Even the smallest routines that had once felt comforting now carried an awkward tension neither of them knew how to break. At night, they lay awake on opposite sides of the bed, separated by only a few inches yet feeling impossibly far apart. One evening, Emily found Daniel sitting alone on the back porch, staring into the darkness beyond the yard. She quietly joined him. "I know you're hurting," she said. Daniel kept his eyes fixed ahead. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel anymore." "You have every right to be angry." "I'm not angry because you survived," he replied. "I'm struggling because you never trusted me enough to tell me the truth before we married." Emily lowered her head. "I wanted to tell you so many times." "Then why didn't you?" She hesitated before answering. "Because every time I imagined that conversation, I imagined losing you." Daniel finally looked at her. "You didn't give me the chance to prove you were wrong." Tears gathered in Emily's eyes. "My past brought threats, fear, and people willing to destroy lives. Before I disappeared, someone I loved blamed me for everything that happened. They walked away believing I had brought danger into their future. After that, I became terrified that honesty would always end the same way." Daniel remained silent. "I wasn't trying to trap you," she continued quietly. "I was trying to believe that one day my past would stop deciding my future." For a brief moment, Daniel saw not deception but exhaustion. Years of fear had shaped every decision she had made. Yet compassion could not erase the feeling that an important choice had been taken away from him. "I need time," he said softly. Emily nodded. I'll wait as long as you need. The following afternoon Daniel returned to work, hoping routine would quiet the storm inside his mind. Instead, another surprise awaited him. A familiar dark sedan was parked across the street. The same mysterious visitor stepped onto the sidewalk before Daniel could enter the garage. I wondered how long it would take, the man said calmly. Daniel's expression hardened. You again. I see you finally opened the envelope. What do you want? The stranger offered a faint smile. Only the truth. I already have it. No, the man replied. You have the version she wanted you to hear. Daniel folded his arms. If you know something, say it. Not yet. The stranger slipped a small business card into Daniel's jacket pocket. When you're ready to learn everything, call the number. Without another word, he walked back toward the waiting sedan. Daniel removed the card but resisted looking at it. Across the street, the vehicle disappeared into traffic. Unknown to Daniel, the stranger had no interest in protecting him or exposing justice. Every carefully timed meeting, every anonymous delivery, and every carefully chosen sentence had been part of a larger plan. The hidden past was merely a tool. His real objective lay somewhere far beyond the fractured marriage he had begun dismantling piece by piece. That evening Daniel stood alone in the garage after closing time, turning the business card over in his hands. He knew he should throw it away. Instead, he slipped it into his wallet. The decision lasted only a second, but somewhere beyond the fading daylight, the unseen manipulator smiled, knowing Daniel had just taken the first step exactly where he wanted him to go. The business card remained inside Daniel Harper's wallet for 3 days before curiosity finally overcame restraint. He had promised himself he would never call the number, yet every unanswered question seemed to grow louder with each passing hour. Emily's confession had explained her hidden past, but it had not explained why a complete stranger appeared determined to tear their marriage apart. Daniel no longer slept through the night. Every quiet moment ended with the same thought. Someone knew far more than either of them was willing to admit. Late Thursday evening, Daniel dialed the number. The call connected after only one ring. I was wondering when you'd call, the familiar voice answered. Who are you? My name is Victor Lane. Daniel remained silent. I knew Emily years ago, Victor continued. Long before she changed her identity. What do you want from us? Victor laughed softly. The truth. I've already heard her side. Exactly. The line went quiet before Victor spoke again. Meet me tomorrow evening. I'll bring proof that your wife is still hiding things from you. Before Daniel could respond, the call ended. The following afternoon, Daniel found an anonymous message waiting on his phone. Ask Emily where she was the night before the trial. Minutes later, another message appeared. She never told investigators everything. Daniel deleted both messages, but their words refused to disappear from his thoughts. That evening, he met Victor in a deserted parking lot beside an abandoned warehouse. The older man carried no visible weapon, only a thin folder tucked beneath one arm. I didn't come here for games, Daniel said. Neither did I. Victor opened the folder and handed him several printed photographs. Some showed Emily speaking with people Daniel did not recognize years before the criminal investigation. Others appeared to capture tense conversations outside courthouse buildings. They proved nothing, Daniel replied. Victor nodded. Not by themselves. He removed a small digital recorder. I think this will interest you more. A woman's voice filled the silence. It sounded unmistakably like Emily. Fragments of conversation followed. I never told them everything. They can't know. It's safer this way. The recording stopped. Daniel frowned. What was she talking about? Victor slowly shrugged. You'll have to ask her. What Daniel did not know was that the recording had been carefully edited, cutting away every sentence explaining that Emily had withheld only personal details unrelated to the investigation because detectives feared they might expose her new identity. The missing context transformed caution into apparent guilt. Victor watched uncertainty spread across Daniel's face. Exactly as planned. Over the following week, the anonymous messages continued. Some arrived late at night. Others appeared during work. Each suggested another unanswered question. Each hinted at another hidden lie. Daniel gradually stopped sharing them with Emily. Instead, he carried them alone. His growing silence frightened her more than open arguments ever could. One evening, she noticed him deleting a message before slipping his phone into his pocket. "Who keeps texting you?" she asked. "Nobody. You've changed. So have you?" The words struck harder than either intended. Emily watched him leave the room without another glance. She immediately searched old emails, legal records, and forgotten contacts from years earlier. Every clue pointed toward one name she desperately hoped never to see again: Victor Lane. He had once worked alongside several members of the fraud network before turning against everyone involved when the investigation collapsed around them. Though never convicted, he blamed Emily for destroying the life he believed he deserved. Now everything made sense. The photographs, the messages, the stranger, the envelope. Someone was not uncovering the past. Someone was rewriting it. Emily rushed to gather evidence proving Victor's deception. But years had erased witnesses, deleted files, and scattered people across the country. Every lead ended in another dead end. Meanwhile, Daniel's confidence continued crumbling beneath carefully manufactured doubt. He began questioning ordinary conversations, innocent explanations, and even his happiest memories, wondering whether every smile had concealed another secret. From the shadows, Victor watched the distance between husband and wife widen exactly as he had imagined. He believed patience would accomplish what anger never could. All he had to do was keep feeding suspicion until trust disappeared completely. By the time Emily realized how carefully the trap had been constructed, she feared the damage had already reached a point where neither truth nor love alone could repair what Victor had deliberately broken. The cracks Victor Lane had carefully carved into Daniel Harper's marriage soon spread into every corner of his life. Each anonymous message, edited recording, and conveniently timed encounter lingered in Daniel's mind long after the words themselves had faded. He replayed conversations with Emily repeatedly, searching for hidden meanings that had never existed. Doubt became a habit, and suspicion slowly replaced the quiet confidence that had once defined him. At the garage, customers noticed the difference almost immediately. Daniel forgot appointments. Simple repairs took twice as long. He stared blankly at engines that he could once diagnose within minutes. His longtime coworker, Mike, finally set down a wrench and approached him. "You've been somewhere else for weeks," Mike said. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Daniel forced a tired smile. "Just dealing with family stuff." Mike folded his arms. "You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Daniel nodded politely, but the advice never reached him. Every attempt at reassurance felt hollow because Victor had convinced him that no one understood the truth except the person feeding his fears. At home, Emily watched her husband disappear behind an invisible wall. He still came home every evening. He still asked whether she had eaten. He still thanked her for dinner. Yet warmth had vanished from every exchange, leaving only careful politeness between them. One rainy evening, Emily placed 2 cups of tea on the living room table. "We can't keep living like this," she said quietly. Daniel looked toward the window instead of at her. "I don't know how else to live right now. I've answered every question you've asked." "I know. Then why does it feel like you've already decided I'm guilty of something?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to believe anymore." Emily reached across the table, but he instinctively leaned back before realizing what he had done. The brief movement hurt both of them more than angry words ever could. Tears filled Emily's eyes. "I think we need some space." Daniel remained silent. "Not because I want to leave you," she continued, "because every conversation ends with both of us hurting even more." After several painful moments, he nodded. "Maybe you're right." The following morning, Emily packed a single suitcase and moved into her older sister's apartment across town. Before leaving, she placed her wedding ring beside a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "I still love you. I just don't know how to reach you anymore." Daniel found the note after returning from work. He sat alone at the kitchen table for nearly an hour, unable to decide whether her departure represented surrender or hope. Victor ensured he never had time to answer that question. That evening, Daniel received another anonymous message. "Interesting how quickly she left. almost like she already had somewhere else to be. He ignored it. Minutes later, another message appeared. Drive past Maple Street if you want proof. Against his better judgment, Daniel climbed into his truck. When he reached Maple Street, he saw Emily entering an apartment building. What he did not know was that her sister lived there. From the opposite side of the road, Victor photographed Daniel watching the building before quietly driving away. The next afternoon, Emily received an envelope containing one of those photographs. There was no return address, only a typed note. He's following you because he doesn't trust you anymore. Emily's hands trembled. She immediately called Daniel. I got something in the mail. So did I, Daniel answered cautiously. Neither understood they had both become victims of the same deception. Instead of bringing them together, every new misunderstanding widened the distance Victor had worked so patiently to create. Watching from afar, he realized neither truth nor lies mattered anymore. All that mattered was controlling what each of them believed about the other. As Daniel and Emily struggled alone with growing fear and heartbreak, Victor calmly prepared the next stage of his revenge, confident that the final confrontation was drawing dangerously close. Rain hammered the windshield as Daniel Harper drove through empty back roads, the wipers struggling against the relentless storm. Victor Lane's latest message had arrived less than an hour earlier. If you want the whole truth, come alone. Tonight, the old Miller property. Daniel had stared at the words for several minutes before grabbing his keys. Every instinct warned him to ignore the invitation, yet weeks of manipulation had worn away his judgment. He believed one final conversation might answer every question that had haunted him since the envelope first appeared. Across town, Emily received a different message. Daniel wants to see you. He finally knows he was wrong. Meet him at the old Miller property before 8. Please come alone. She hesitated only briefly. Despite everything that had happened, she still wanted to save their marriage. If Daniel truly wished to talk without anger or suspicion, she refused to let fear stop her. Neither realized Victor had written both messages. The abandoned farmhouse stood at the edge of an overgrown field surrounded by broken fences and towering trees. Years of neglect had left shattered windows, collapsing walls, and a sagging roof that groaned beneath the pounding rain. Lightning flashed across the dark sky as Daniel stepped cautiously through the front doorway. Emily? He called. Only silence answered. Moments later, another vehicle stopped outside. Emily entered the house, soaked from the storm. When she saw Daniel standing in the dusty hallway, relief briefly softened her face. You came, she whispered. Daniel frowned. You asked me to. Confusion replaced relief. No, I thought you wanted to meet. Before either could speak again, slow applause echoed from the upper floor. Victor Lane emerged from the shadows carrying a flashlight. I was beginning to think one of you wouldn't show. Daniel stepped forward. You set this up. Victor smiled. Of course. Emily's voice trembled. Why? Because neither of you deserved the peaceful life you tried to build. Daniel clenched his fists. You've been lying to both of us. I've been guiding both of you. Victor descended the staircase without hurry. You supplied the fear. I simply pointed it in the right direction. Emily stared at him in disbelief. You destroyed everything. Victor laughed quietly. No, I merely uncovered weaknesses that were already there. Daniel's anger finally broke through weeks of restraint. You manipulated us. I exposed trust that wasn't strong enough to survive questions. Emily stepped between them. Daniel, don't. Victor reached into his coat. For a brief second, both believed he was pulling out more documents. Instead, a handgun appeared. The room fell silent. You blamed me for your life falling apart, Emily said. Victor's expression hardened. You testified. I told the truth. You chose yourself. I chose to stop innocent people from being hurt. Victor raised the weapon. Daniel instinctively moved in front of Emily. Put it down. You still think you're the hero? Victor replied coldly. The first shot shattered the silence. Daniel staggered backward, clutching his shoulder. Emily screamed. She grabbed a broken wooden plank from the floor as Victor advanced. Another deafening shot echoed through the farmhouse, splintering the wall beside her. Daniel forced himself forward despite the pain, tackling Victor into the remains of an old table. The handgun skidded across the floor. All three struggled desperately. Lightning illuminated the room as rain poured through the broken roof. Victor reached the weapon first. Emily lunged toward him. Another shot rang out. Victor collapsed without a word. The revolver slid across the floor and came to rest beside Daniel. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Emily looked down. A dark stain spread across her jacket. Daniel crawled toward her. "No," he whispered. She sank slowly against the wall. "I never stopped loving you." Tears mixed with rainwater on Daniel's face as he held her trembling hand. "I'm sorry. So am I." Her grip weakened. Outside, distant sirens finally pierced the storm. Daniel remained beside her until flashing police lights illuminated the shattered windows. Officers rushed inside to find Victor dead, Daniel wounded, and Emily barely conscious. The storm had finally begun to pass, but the quiet that followed carried no comfort. The farmhouse stood as a monument to months of manipulation, broken trust, and irreversible choices. As investigators secured the scene and paramedics fought to save the survivors, the truth behind Victor's carefully orchestrated revenge was only beginning to emerge, promising answers that had arrived far too late for everyone whose lives had been shattered that night. Blue emergency lights continued flashing across the abandoned Miller property long after the rain had stopped. Police officers stretched yellow tape around the crumbling farmhouse while forensic investigators moved carefully through shattered furniture, broken glass, and pools of rainwater that reflected the harsh glow of portable floodlights. The violence had ended, but the work of uncovering the truth had only begun. Detective Sarah Collins stood silently in the center of the main room, studying every detail before anyone disturbed the scene further. Years of investigating violent crimes had taught her that the loudest stories were rarely the most accurate. Initial reports suggested a jealous husband had lured his wife to the abandoned house before a deadly confrontation spiraled out of control. Yet something about the scattered evidence refused to fit that simple explanation. "Photograph everything twice," she instructed the forensic team. "Nothing leaves this building until we've documented every inch." Nearby, paramedics loaded Daniel Harper into an ambulance. His shoulder wound had been stabilized, but emotional shock weighed more heavily than the injury itself. Emily remained in critical condition after emergency surgery, leaving investigators with only one surviving witness capable of explaining the night's events. Back inside the farmhouse, technicians collected Victor Lane's mobile phone, laptop bag, handwritten notes, and several disposable memory cards hidden beneath loose floorboards. What was he keeping down there? One officer asked. "We'll find out," Collins replied. By sunrise, investigators had transported every recovered device to the digital forensic laboratory. The first breakthrough arrived that afternoon. Victor's phone contained dozens of anonymous messaging accounts linked to prepaid numbers. Hundreds of carefully timed messages had been sent separately to Daniel and Emily over several months. Each message encouraged suspicion, distorted ordinary events, or planted new doubts immediately after periods of reconciliation. He wasn't reacting to their marriage, an analyst observed while reviewing the records. He was directing it. Surveillance footage soon strengthened that conclusion. Traffic cameras placed Victor near Daniel's garage on multiple occasions before anonymous deliveries appeared. Security footage from a nearby convenience store captured him purchasing prepaid phones using cash. Additional recordings showed his vehicle parked outside Emily's temporary apartment on several evenings when threatening letters were delivered. The evidence continued growing. Forensic specialists recovered deleted audio files from Victor's laptop. Each recording contained original conversations that had later been edited into misleading fragments before being anonymously sent to Daniel. Entire sentences had been removed, changing harmless explanations into suspicious admissions. Detective Collins listened carefully. "He manufactured doubt," she said quietly. "He didn't create lies from nothing. He rearranged the truth until it looked like betrayal." Phone records painted an equally disturbing picture. Victor repeatedly contacted anonymous online accounts, encrypted messaging services, and temporary email addresses, carefully hiding his identity while maintaining complete control over every stage of the manipulation. Meanwhile, Daniel remained under police supervision at the hospital. News reports initially portrayed him as the primary suspect responsible for the confrontation. Commentators speculated that jealousy and anger had driven him toward violence. Collins refused to accept those conclusions. She spent hours comparing timelines, digital evidence, witness statements, and forensic reports. Each new discovery pointed in the same direction. Daniel had made painful mistakes. He had allowed fear to cloud his judgment. He had withdrawn from the person who needed his trust most. Yet the evidence consistently showed someone else steering those emotions toward disaster. Victor had studied both victims carefully. He learned Daniel's insecurities. He exploited Emily's fears. He timed every message with deliberate precision, ensuring neither could fully rebuild trust before another carefully planted doubt appeared. By the end of the week, investigators formally concluded that Victor's campaign of deception had directly influenced nearly every major conflict leading to the fatal confrontation. Detective Collins closed the final evidence folder and looked toward the farmhouse photographs spread across her desk. "This wasn't simply a murder," she said quietly. "It was psychological manipulation carried out over months." Outside the investigation room, reporters continued searching for simple answers. Inside, the truth proved far more complicated. Daniel Harper was not the calculating architect many had first imagined. He was a grieving husband whose judgment had steadily collapsed beneath relentless emotional manipulation, fear, isolation, and carefully engineered deception. Even with Victor dead, one question remained painfully unresolved. If Emily survived her injuries, both she and Daniel would have to confront not only everything they had lost, but also whether forgiveness could exist after a tragedy built upon truths revealed far too late. Before the credits rolled, the investigation had already answered every legal question that detectives could realistically solve. Victor Lane's calculated campaign of manipulation had been reconstructed piece by piece, revealing how months of lies, selective truths, and carefully timed deceptions pushed two frightened people toward a catastrophe neither truly wanted. Courts could close the case, evidence could be archived, and official reports could be filed. Yet none of those actions could restore the lives forever changed by one man's obsession with revenge. The narrator speaks calmly, allowing the silence between sentences to carry as much weight as the words themselves. This was never a story about a single mistake. It became a tragedy because hidden trauma remained unspoken. Fear replaced honest conversation, manipulation distorted reality, and prejudice encouraged people to judge before understanding. Every missed opportunity to seek help or to trust one another widened the distance until reconciliation seemed impossible. Daniel survived with permanent emotional scars that no medical treatment could erase. Emily's courage, fear, and hope became inseparable parts of the same heartbreaking story. Victor achieved the revenge he had pursued for years, yet his victory existed only in destruction. Every family connected to the case buried dreams alongside those they loved, forced to accept that hatred always demands a higher price than anyone expects. The narrator offers one final reflection. Secrets born from fear often grow heavier with time, but cruelty, manipulation, and violence never provide lasting answers. Honest communication cannot guarantee perfect outcomes, yet silence and deception allow resentment to flourish where compassion might otherwise survive. The cost of delayed truth is measured not only in broken relationships but sometimes in lives that can never be reclaimed. As the music fades, the camera lingers on a single photograph from Daniel and Emily's wedding day. Their smiles remain frozen beneath clear autumn skies, untouched by the darkness waiting beyond that celebration. Beside the photograph rests an evidence bag containing the weathered envelope that started everything. Together they form one final image, reminding viewers that love without trust, truth without courage, and justice arriving too late can leave behind only memories, unanswered questions, and an enduring sense of loss.